Hello and welcome to our DBHW special event where we will be quickly breaking down Trump's big, beautiful bill, how that might impact you, how that might impact businesses around you and the economy. So here I have Jared Levy and Wendy Hall here to answer a couple questions I'm going to run through. Maybe you have these questions, maybe you don't, but regardless, we hope that these questions can help you understand the bill a little bit more. So I'm going to get started with the first question. What does the bill cover?
So this is a wide sweeping bill. You're talking roughly 1,000 pages of legislation, everything from tax laws, which we'll get into here shortly, healthcare, welfare, education, immigration, energy, defense, our infrastructure of our country, even how you pay people and how that might be reported to the government are all affected. I will say that you are likely, especially if you're a client of ours, you're likely to experience some aspect or impact from this law in your financial or healthcare life. I will tell you that we'll be including a cheat sheet along with this email that'll kind of help guide you, but it's comprehensive. I mean, this bill is definitely sweeping. As we go through this, I know Wendy's got a lot to share.
Wendy, anything to add?
I think there is so much to cover. We're not going to be able to cover it all in this video, so I can't emphasize enough. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Next question, how might this bill affect our economy?
All right, so this is a big one. And I will say that there are sort of different strings of thought around this or lines of thought around it. There are numerous ways we talked about how this bill is going to impact America. I would say that the bill overall is stimulative, right? You're renewing tax cuts, you're giving people more incentives, you're reducing taxes and costs, you're allowing tips to be tax-free to a point. So that's all good. The flip side, though, is this bill costs a lot of money, right? So the other train of thought is that, okay, we're spending, this is going to cost us, I think, trillions of dollars over its span. What does that mean? Well, that could affect the nation's credit rating. If you think about it, right, if you take on more debt, your credit score is likely to fall, and then it'll cost you more to borrow money. At a time right now, I'm concerned because our nation, again, we've got relatively high interest rates. We're paying high interest rates to refinance our debt. There are some out there that believe this could affect our credit rating as a nation and actually lower the credit rating, which would cost us, which would actually set interest rates potentially higher for the long term. That could be a problem. What I will say real quick here, defense, infrastructure sectors, if you're an investor, those are probably likely to remain hot. There are areas also in technology, which we're looking towards. Those are going to benefit from that additional income and funding. Healthcare systems, providers, and eventually consumers, mainly at the lower end, those areas and those people are actually going to feel a negative impact because remember, there are some changes in the way Medicare is billed out. There's going to be a lot more auditing. It's going to be tougher for, healthcare providers and systems to collect money. And at some point, that's going to reduce healthcare. So those are just some of the ways. Again, there's a lot to it. But, I think as the average everyday American, those are the areas we want to kind of focus on.
Sure. Thank you. What are the tax law changes for families with children?
Well, this tax act has just packed full of changes for families in a really great way. Some of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act changes that were made law in 2017 have now been extended as permanent. The higher standard deduction has been made permanent, and the child tax credit that had increased to $2,000 is now increasing to $2,200 and will be inflation adjusted going forward. Remember, credits are a dollar for dollar offset against your tax owed, unlike a deduction, which reduces the amount of taxable income that you have to pay on. Additionally, there are these new Trump accounts, which will be tax preferred accounts, allowing for thousands of dollars to be submitted into those accounts and grow tax free for children born between 2024 and 2029. There's still some information to be developed and put out about these Trump accounts, so we don't have a lot of information right now. So if you've got a baby on the way, that's something to think about. Additionally, the 529 accounts have qualified expenses expanded. More expenses qualify, including homeschooling expenses can be taken from those 529 accounts. And the adoption credit now has $5,000 of refundable amounts from that for children that are adopted. And so lots of great impacts on families with children.
Thank you. So what does this bill mean for the consumer, such as small businesses?
Well, one of the big changes from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act was the qualified business income deduction that allowed for a 20% deduction off of business income before subjecting that to income taxes. And that QBI deduction has now been made permanent going forward. So there is no sunset provision on it anymore. Along with other accelerated expense deductions, businesses are going to see that ease in some of their costs and inflation pressures. So that will hopefully translate into reduced costs or cost inflation for consumers as businesses stop feeling that pressure of increased cost without being able to increase prices to the consumers as quickly. That will absolutely be a great turn for the economy.
Yeah, I agree, Wendy. I think that, everything that you talked about is 100% true. And it's kind of coming from both sides. You talked about credits in the energy space and environment. There's obviously going to be a repeal of certain credits, but there will be, like I talked about earlier, 150 billion going towards defense infrastructure. This includes drone companies, not to mention tax breaks. So on the corporate side, there are credits coming through, there are incentives coming through. Again, it goes both ways. As we also know, one thing to keep in mind on the business side is that electric car credits for purchases, those will be going away and getting sunsetted in certain areas. And there's also a bias towards U.S. manufacturers. So there's a lot of nuances in there. But again, I would say net a good thing for small to medium sized companies for sure.
Thank you. I'm curious to know, will small and mid-cap stocks see a return with this bill?
Small and mid-cap have been largely ignored. They've underperformed over the past couple of years. And the theory is, unfortunately, this economy, while stocks are reaching all-time highs in the big indices, Main Street is not really feeling so well. When Trump came in office, a lot of folks expected a lot of deals to get done, mergers and acquisitions. And, with Independence Day and the tariffs and all the other things, that kind of paused that a little bit. I do believe that this bill will help stimulate, as Wendy said, the consumer. And I also believe that it will help, as long as we get these tariffs in order, stimulate a lot of deals and movement within the mid-cap sector. So I'm actually bullish here on small and mid-cap stocks.
Thank you for explaining that. Are Social Security payments now tax-free?
Unfortunately, no. That was one area that was originally proposed early in the bill's life, but at the end, that portion was cut. However, seniors now have a $6,000 bonus deduction for 2025 through 2028 tax years per individual 65 or older. So that will eliminate taxes on Social Security and other income for a lot of seniors. And again, that's per individual. That can be a $12,000 deduction on top of the standard deduction for a married filing joint couple when both are 65 or older. It is phased out for income higher than $150,000, but it also is available even if you don't itemize and regardless of whether or not you collect Social Security. So if you're 65 but not collecting Social Security yet, you still qualify for that credit.
What's the story with energy and vehicle credits?
Yeah, so this is a complex one with a lot of moving parts. So remember, there are repeals happening for green energy sort of initiatives, right? So the Biden era clean energy tax credits, climate related incentives, those are either going away or being reduced. So what you'll see is, again, if we're talking about the investment side, a lot of the green energy type companies, they may not benefit as some of the more traditional fossil fuel drivers. There's some reductions in taxation and in regulation, again, along with this bill that will help stimulate more of the traditional oil companies. Now, I believe the tax credits are being phased out for electric cars. I believe it's over this next by the end of the year, I believe, and I'll have to double check.
90 days. Yep.
Thank
it's
you.
90 days. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Wendy.
You're correct. The vehicle credits are ending September 30th on the electric and hybrid vehicles if they still qualify. So that credit already had been narrowed down significantly. But if you're thinking about buying one that does qualify, you better do it by September 30th or you're going to lose out.
How are tips and overtime excluded from tax?
That was also a very hot contender in this bill. The tips and overtime will be allowed as a deduction from your income, but only until 2029. So it ends during 2028. The deduction is limited to $25,000 per taxpayer, and the overtime limit is a reduction of $12,500 per taxpayer, again, phased out for higher incomes. There's going to need to be some W-2 updating for the reporting on that. How that's going to flow through on the tax return has yet to be determined. Again, you won't need to itemize your deductions, and it's limited based on your income. So those are some great benefits and can really see thousands of dollars in tax reduction for some of our middle class taxpayers.
What else do people need to know?
As we've talked about, there is a myriad of detail that needs to be gone through. We've done our best to sort of hit some of the high points. But I would say, if you're a Medicaid recipient, there's going to be more frequent eligibility reviews, co-pays, work requirements if you don't have dependents. SNAP obviously is going to see cuts of about 186 billion. And on the immigration side, this bill is allocated about 180 billion over 10 years for ICE and border security. So again, that's, if you're in that field and curious about where the money's going, that's another big piece of it. As I said earlier, 150 billion to defense. But the bottom line is this: I think that everybody's situation is, as we know, unique and nuanced. And I really think that it would be smart to sit down with your financial advisor or your tax professional and figure out how this impacts you in the coming year and start making those changes, right, Wendy? I mean, there are some potential lifestyle changes you can start making now to prepare yourself, whether good or bad, of an impact that, you probably want to get ahead of the curve instead of being hit by it, if you will, right?
Absolutely. Some of the changes that we can make now can give you a bottom line impact now instead of waiting until April 15th to get that tax refund. If we make changes to your withholding, project where you might be with that overtime deduction, you could really use that money now instead of waiting almost 12 months from now.
Those are the 10 questions that I had. If you do have more, I know Jared mentioned it, Wendy mentioned it, please reach out. We are here for you. We are available. We are ready. But I hope this helped, and we appreciate you guys joining and listening. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.